Students, they are our future, but less and less of them are followers of Christ. This generation of youth are the least churched we have ever seen, and almost 30% of them identify as atheists. In the United States, there are over 69,000 middle school and high schools. In those schools are over 24 million students between the ages of 11 and 17. Of those students, at least 15 million do not regularly attend church. Campus Life, a ministry of Youth for Christ, has reached out to these kids for over 45 years. There is Campus Life ministry spanning the country from San Diego, California to Long Island, New York, and everywhere in between. With over 1,000 ministry sites, we engage over 100,000 students each week, and that number is growing daily. The question remains, with so many lost students, how can we possibly reach them all? How does Youth for Christ reach this skeptical generation that is unaware of their need for a Savior? We don't wait for students to come to us. We intentionally go into their world in order to initiate new relationships, whether it be on campus, hanging out at the skate park, or rooting for their team on a Friday night. We go where students are. As these relationships form, students enter into the community of campus life. One natural way that happens is through Club. Club is a weekly high-energy gathering where community is built and God's story is told. We also create opportunities for students to engage in deeper relationships with campus life leaders through shared experiences. We spend time with students to earn the right to be heard, model Christ-like behavior, and be a listening ear. As relationships grow, we connect with students and give them individual attention to ask questions, share doubts, and navigate life. We also provide opportunities for students to gather in small groups where we discuss relevant issues that they face and their spiritual needs. As we do this, we help them connect their story to God's story. Trips are an opportunity to bring students out of their environment. Through unforgettable activities, Christ-sharing relationships, and a clear presentation of the gospel, we see God change lives forever. Throughout this journey, we work together with the local church to help raise up lifelong followers of Jesus. But that is just the beginning. We engage Christian students who are committed to personal growth and influencing the people around them for Christ. These students then join us in the mission of sharing God's story with their friends and raising up lifelong followers of Jesus. Many of them even return to Youth for Christ as volunteer or staff leaders. So, with so many lost students, how do we reach them all? By empowering a relational army of student and adult leaders to engage students in authentic, Christ-sharing relationships, one student at a time.
Well, you've just seen the topic for today's program. Hi, I'm Deacon Adolfo Carbajal, your host today for Joy in Our Town. And obviously, we're talking about Youth for Christ. And with us today is Mr. Fred Douglas, the Executive Director of Youth for Christ. You've been a veteran of 40 years in youth and family ministry. So you've been involved. You've been around the block a few times with young people.
Yes, times have changed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fred, for being here with us.
It's my pleasure.
I was reading your demo, your bio about your ministry experience, and it speaks of a deep passion for the gospel of Christ, especially with regards to youth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, tell us. We've already seen the video. We've already get an idea of some of the things that are taking place at Youth for Christ, although there's a lot of other things as well. But before we get into that, share with us some of your passion that you have.
Well, you talk about the fact that I've been involved for 40 years with Youth for Christ, well, youth ministry. Mm-hmm. Actually more than 40 years if you count my youth ministry years in the church. Mm-hmm. I knew I was going into youth ministry when I graduated from college. I went to Warner Pacific, stopped playing basketball because I wanted to focus on youth ministry. But what I discovered as I was doing youth work back in those days, that was the mid to late 70s, I was not a good fit in the traditional church youth program because so many of the kids that I was reaching didn't come from church families. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there was a conflict with parents because they didn't want that bad element mm-hmm. around their kids. So I began to realize that there's got to be something different for me to do And that was when Youth for Christ actually discovered me, and I discovered them. At the same time, I had done a youth internship up in Canada back in summer of '77, and they wanted me to come back and be a full-time youth guy up there. But I bumped into a YFC guy right before I went up, and he hounded me for months. He actually gave me a book to read called Lord, Make My Life Count. I've never read it. I still have it, but I've never read it. But I was so intrigued by what Youth for Christ was doing that when I came back, I said, I'll do this for a year. So here we are 40 years later, and I'm still there.
And you're still at it, you know. So you emerged from churchianity to address the needs of the young people at that time, and even today. Tell us about some of those needs.
Well, if I could, I'll give you the progression of the youth culture.
All right.
In the 40s, there was no youth culture. You were either a big kid or a young adult or whatever, and you had chores. And so many of American kids were growing up in rural settings. The cities were still around, but not to the impact they are today. Then the 50s came along, and everything changed. And so in the 50s, with rock and roll and all of that happened, kids lost what we would call their sense of innocence. And that was when sock hops, kissing a girl, you know, all the things that went on I was born during that time, so I don't know everything. Then the 60s came along, and it was anybody over 30 cannot be trusted. We begin to rebel against authority.
The establishment.
Yes, and the hell no, we won't go, the Vietnam movement, all of that stuff. So it's said that kids, they didn't lose their sense of innocence, they added their loss of respect for authority. And then we moved into the 70s, which was my teenage years, and the latchkey kid became common because divorce skyrocketed. Adding to those first two, now you have a loss of love because they didn't know what love is. Foreigner came out with a song, I Want to Know What Love Is. It's still a powerful song today. The 80s rolled around, kids began to wear black, teenage suicide went up, and we say that kids, shootings began to happen, kids lost their sense of hope. Then the 90s is when the shootings really escalated and the gang activity, kids lost their sense of respect for life. So you start adding all those things up. Now, it's almost as if kids are totally disillusioned today because with our current political climate and everything that's happened, they don't know who to believe. The family's been desecrated. Just all these different things have happened. And what they know as a norm today is a variety of things. And I guess it would be safe to say that when I was young, the world was either black or white in terms of what's right and what's wrong and the rules, and a little bit of gray in the middle. Today, the world is completely gray with just a tiny sliver of black or white. So people make their own rules now. And so that's kind of what's happened to youth culture. And so when we see a kid today, there's an accumulation of all of those things that we have to deal with instead of one or two or three as we did way back when.
So young people are experiencing relativism, truly, right, with the breakdown of family and a breakdown of identity. And I think Hannah's story pretty much explains that experience.
Yes.
Childhood is supposed to be a happy time. For me, it wasn't. Abuse, neglect, and failure. My parents did drugs and alcohol, so I was in foster care by the age of 5. They were abusive, and it was tough going through that. Eventually, I was the oldest one there, so I had to protect all of the younger ones that lived with us. I can remember this one time, this 6-year-old named Mark lived with us for a while. He got thrown across the room and slammed into the wall. He was crying and I was fighting and trying to push them back, but they wouldn't stop. I begged for them to stop, and finally, they did. But afterwards, they weren't too happy with me and shoved me into the sink, choked until I nearly threw up. I told my caseworker, but it only got to court once or twice. They didn't really believe me. My foster parents had always had a good cover-up story. So it continued. Being a Christian. My mom had started off being a Christian. She went to church and did really well, and then she got into drugs, and everything changed from there. She became a different person. Being a Christian, my foster parents told me I couldn't do it because I had sinned too much. I wasn't good enough. They said I'd go to hell for everything I've done. And then I started to go to youth group. I didn't really realize it was Christian-based. My friends had just talked about hanging out, and so I went one day. I didn't even know it was at a church. The leader named Bruce. He was really nice to me and always asked me questions and tried to get to know me. It felt nice to have someone care about me so much. So I kept going, and I finally told him everything. One summer, he asked me to go to camp with them. YFC camp. I figured it was a lot like group, so I said yes to going. I didn't realize it was Christian-based and that we'd be learning more about God there. Camp was 5 days long, and it was life-changing. When I went there was a speaker. His name was Gabriel. He spoke of the story of Zacchaeus in the Bible. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. And back then, that was a huge sin to do that, to take so much money from people. So one day, Zacchaeus went to see Jesus that everyone had been speaking about and climbed up into a tree. Jesus walked right up to him, asked him to come down, and requested to stay at his place. It was then that I realized that I could be forgiven for everything I had done. Camp had changed me. It made me want to be a better person. I remember meeting Marcia and Randy. They had helped out with YFC, bringing dinners and stuff. And I talked to them a little bit, and they finally let me go to church with them, and I went every Sunday. I was so fascinated with it. I had finally decided to change my ways. Before, I thought that sex and drugs and alcohol were the fun things to do. But becoming a Christian had made me decide to make different choices in my life. I attended Roosevelt High School. It wasn't really my choice, but it was the one close to my foster home, so that's where I went. I went there for 2.5 years before my foster parents kicked me out. I had nowhere to go, so my sister finally took me in. She lived out in Beaverton. But that high school is my home. It's the school I love. It's the school I went to. All of my friends were there, so I decided to stick around and still go there. I had to take a 2-hour bus ride every day to get to school, and then a 2-hour bus ride back just to get home. During my senior year, it got hard living with my sister, and I had gotten a job somewhere down in Tigard. So I moved in with Marcia and Randy, and they helped me get to school every day and helped guide me to what I wanted to do with my life. When I finally applied for the scholarship, I figured Warner would be a great school for me since it was Christian. I could better myself there and do what I really wanted. I'm now attending Warner, and I'm going to study social work so I can become a caseworker or even a foster parent just to help the kids when they don't have anyone, kind of like I did. I really want to make a difference and be the person that they can talk to, because there's so many foster kids out there who get abused and neglected, and some of them end up pregnant before they're even ready, and siblings get split up in foster homes. And I really want to be the person there to help them and create more foster homes and be a guidance for them. Warner's really helping me develop as a person and become who I want to be. It's a great place for me to be. Youth for Christ is kind of what led me to meet Bruce and Marcia and Randy. And being around adults who were so supportive and so sweet and just wanted to know more about who I am, it was nice. And so that brought me to them, and they brought me to Christ. There's still that tug back of wanting to be a part of my actual family. But my mother is so caught up in drugs that it's really hard to even go back because I can't connect with her unless it involves drugs. Things are different now, being a Christian and being me, becoming a better me. I've come a long way and there's still a long way to go, but now I know my story has a better ending. It's a place where you can feel safe and everyone's really nice and you get to know great people, and I know some people in youth group who aren't Christian and they're still so sweet and they're so much fun to hang around with, and they get you involved in so many different things. They help you out through so much. I think it's a great place to help teens grow and become a bigger person. It really changes who you are and changes your perspective on things. And it's not always serious like people would think. It's not like, oh, let's read about God. It's actually like you get to experience fun times, like we do all-nighters and stuff, and we get to be around people who actually really care about us. And that changes our life.
So Hannah's story pretty much showed her own life, but also brought about a sense of hope for the future when people in ministry, people who are concerned, people like you and all the other different volunteers that are part of Youth for Christ reach out to that segment of the community.
Exactly. And Bruce Ruppin, who was one of our staff guys at Roosevelt High at the time, was her initial contact with us. And through that, she eventually got to know more of our staff and people, and ultimately got involved with our board chair, Marcia Elliott, who's in the video, and her husband, Randy, who eventually became her foster parents. And to this day, Hannah still lives with them. Is going to school and working and trying to grow up and become a responsible adult.
That's a very powerful story, and I would beg to correct you on that one. I think they've become her parents as opposed to her foster parents. I mean, truly.
I would agree. Yes.
Good. So, Youth with a Mission has outreach for the campus life for people that are, or Youth for Christ.
Yeah.
Has an outreach for the campus life for students, and as well as for city life. Right. Tell us more about the city life part.
City Life Ministry is similar to campus life. Campus life is school-based because you take your rural areas and your suburban areas, kids are very much aligned and have allegiance to their school. You know, they get excited. We're Centennial Eagles, or we're Clackamas Cavaliers, or we're Beaverton Beavers. In the city, because kids are going all over the place to school. I can live in Northeast and come all the way to Southeast and go to Franklin. I'm more aligned to my neighborhood. Plus, in the urban setting, which the City Life program is addressing, there are different needs. A lot of times in suburban settings, when games and skits are done, they're done with food. You've probably seen some of the skits from the 70s, the dancing chickens and all of that thing. When you're dealing with kids in urban settings, there are so many poor kids who are wondering why you're playing with food when they can't even put more than one meal on the table at home. So you make adjustments. So the topics and the themes and the things you do are the same, but some of the dynamics of how you do the ministry are slightly different. That's the only variation between the two.
Wow, that's interesting. So you have to tailor each program to the lived experience of each group of people that you're trying to reach.
And I also forgot to mention, in City Life, you're also dealing with helping them through 5 different things. For example, civic literacy, academic literacy. One of the cool things about City Life, they teach kids how to handle money. Something that nobody else is teaching them, because so many people in the city setting, their bank is their wallet. And it's not even a wallet, sometimes just a wad of money. And so one of the exciting things that I laugh about, our board chair, Marcia, does a thing called Financial Institute for kids. And the first thing they do is help them assess how much they're worth. And they take this form home, they go home and list everything they own and what it approximately costs. Then they come back, and they always come back so proud of themselves, and they let's say they're worth $5,000, and then you start looking at what their net worth is in. Oh, that pair of Nikes won't be around this time next year.
Oh, yeah.
You might outgrow those pants. And so they start realizing that their material wealth is not what they thought it was.
So value is foundational as well. But before you even get into that level of ideas about value, you have to establish self-value and self-worth and self-dignity first. And I think that's where Austin's story comes in.
I did grow up in like sort of a bad situation. Occasional shootings, always paranoid, like in the household, not really being able to eat all the time was just one of the things. My dad wasn't really there like that. Every time like he is there, it seemed like he's more of like just that one relative that you never see, like an uncle, but he usually wasn't around much. Like right now, he's doing some time. My mom was the main source of like my everything. She taught me my morals, my manners. I moved here when I was about 6, 7, and it was kind of different because like there wasn't that many black people here, so it was just like kind of weird not seeing that. And there's like a whole bunch of white people, and I kind of had to conform in a way. Camp was great. Like I really liked it. It did a number on me. It was pretty emotional at times, but sometimes it'd just be kind of like goofy and wacky and stuff. That was pretty cool. And like it was kind of like an ultimate bonding between people that you don't really know that well, but you just come out and just worship Jesus and stuff. It was pretty cool. Actually say yes to Jesus and everything, and it was just kind of great seeing everyone being so open and honest. And I try and strive to be the best I can in praise and try to learn the gospel so I can be better towards everyone around me as well. My story, like it started sad at the beginning, but then like you look back at it and you're like, okay, I was this person, but that made me stronger. And just to look back at it, you're just like, yeah. This whole program means the world to me, to be honest. Like, it really changed my life. Like, I was in a bad situation, like I said, and just to get away from it and to take a step back and to just contemplate where I'm at and how I can fix it and make others come to that realization by telling them about this organization and program. They just need to do it. This is great.
Yeah, Day Austin's a great young man. He's actually involved with our Campus Life program at Clackamas High School.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So Day's Austin's story, is it an example of what a lot of people are experiencing? Is it?
I would say his story in particular is an example of what a lot of kids of color go through, because he is in a suburban high school.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of issues and things that they have to deal with, but they're not that different than kids in the city. It's just that they've been in a different setting. But now what we're finding is more and more kids, even white kids in the suburbs, are struggling with some of the similar issues, not the racial issues, but other issues. The breakdown of family, the lack of leadership from a father or a mother in their home. Because often in the suburban setting, what happens is both mom and dad are working hard for the life they're providing for their kids, so they're both gone.
They're both gone, yeah.
And the kids are raising themselves.
And I think that's where some of the activities like the camp and all the other different things that some people would say, well, that's just entertaining the kids, is absolutely necessary to fill that aspect of their need before we can, or maybe even use it as a vehicle to enter into those deeper aspects of life.
The sad thing about summer camp is a lot of times at the end of the week, kids don't want to leave.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because for the first time, it's not so much they like this place and they want to do all these funny activities and events. For the first time, they feel like they belong to something. Unfortunately, that's how gangs win so many kids over too. Because so many of these kids, for the first time, somebody's listening to me, somebody values me, somebody thinks I'm important. And more than anything, they're separated from media. One of the things that happens when you get to our camps is we collect all of the cell phones and all of that, because you go black when you go there, you go dark, there's no media. And so they suddenly have to learn how to do this.
Yeah, how to have a relationship and how to speak.
Yeah.
You know, our time is so limited, but there's opportunities for volunteerism, as well as maybe some events that you have coming up.
Right. We are always looking for people who want to minister to kids. You know, volunteers with us is not helping set up the room and pouring punch and putting out the cookies. It's being on the front lines working with 5 or 6 kids where you're invested in their lives. You're leading them in a small group. You do activities with us with them. You go to camp with them. You do a variety of things. We also have volunteers who help us in our office. We have volunteers who help us do our events that you mentioned. Our Comedy Cafe is coming up on the 25th of February. It's one of our major fundraising events, but it's also a fun night to expose people to who we are. We have a professional comedian who's clean. Cleto Rodriguez is coming to be with us from San Antonio, Texas. A very hilarious Hispanic.
Good.
Good man.
And for other events, we can log onto your website and see all the different postings and everything that that
Just
you have
log on
coming
to yfcpdx.org.
That's great. Well, Fred, thank you so much for being here with us today, for sharing your story and sharing your life with our young people. And we thank you for joining us on Joy in Our Town. We'll see you next time. God bless you. Goodbye.